Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Elizabeth Johnson, and I'm chairman at Simpson Scarborough. On behalf of my business partners, Jason Simon and Dana Edwards, I want to just welcome you and thank you for joining us today. Real quick before we get started, I have to give a shout out to a few people on our team that made this study possible. Meredith, Malachi, Hira, Katie, you all know what you did. We're so grateful. Thank you for all the heavy lifting you did on this great body of work. We actually have over 500 people signed up to attend this. I can't even imagine that there are actually that many people here, but we're so pleased that everyone is finding value in the data that we're gathering. Because we are such a large group, we're not going to be able to take questions verbally today, but we do want to encourage you to use the Q&A or the chat function to submit your questions. We have people who are ready to answer them right in the chat so that you'll get the answers immediately. And any questions that we don't get to during this presentation, we'll actually put into a follow-up email and we'll share them around with everyone. We're actually recording this webinar and you'll get a link to it because there are going to be some exclusive data points and information that we're only sharing in the webinar. It won't even be in the final report. So we will send around a link to the recording, and we'll also send you the full final version of our report, which is actually very similar to the document that I'm going to share with you today. And we encourage you to share it around your campus with your colleagues. Finally, we are very excited to share an online dashboard tool that we've created. It will allow you to actually go in and look at the data from both waves of our survey. You'll have the ability to break it down by key demographics that may be of interest to you, things like race, geography, type of school that a student is attending, type of school that the student is a college student is attending. We're working out the final kinks on that, and we'll be sharing a link out to that either tomorrow or Friday. Still working on making sure it works with everyone's browsers. So we want to encourage you to connect with us also on LinkedIn and Twitter. Follow us as individuals, follow the company. You can also reach out to us directly with questions and comments about this research. Emails for every single person on our team are on our website, and we'd love to hear from you. So before we jump in, the news about what's going on with current and prospective students is not easy to hear. I know for us, it's not easy to report, so I know it's not easy for you to hear. We're trying not to be alarmist in our predictions. We don't want to make the problem worse, but the predictions are based solely on our analysis of the data. We were very careful in our assumptions, but we all know about predictions, right? We've seen the University of Washington, their predictions about how many people are going to succumb to the virus. You know, they can change dramatically over time as things change. At one point, they were estimating that over 200,000 Americans might die from coronavirus, and thank goodness they've cut that way back. So it's important to recognize that we believe our prediction is correct right now. And the reason we wanted to do this study is because we think it's important to measure the problem so that you can mobilize an appropriate response to it. All right, so real quick, just so everyone knows who we are, we have a lot of friends and clients on this call right now. So hello to everyone, we miss you. And we hope you're staying safe and doing well. But for those of you who don't know who we are, we're a marketing agency that works exclusively in higher education. We were founded in 2006 as a market research firm, so we do a ton of research. We're now a full service agency with 45 employees across research, strategy, creative, and digital teams. We basically help colleges build their marketing and brand strategies. We write and implement their marketing plans, including building websites and producing video. Our clients include institutions like NYU, I think they're on today, Cal Poly, UF, you're here today too, University of Florida, Fordham, hi guys, TCNJ, RIT, William & Mary, North Central College, Butler University, Seattle University. I wish I could name every single school that we work with because it's a real privilege to do so. We feel a very deep connection to higher education. It's all we do. We believe in the power of higher education. We totally agree with the president of Brown. The other day she said that reopening college and university campuses in the fall should be a national priority, and I couldn't wait to get that tweeted out. So we hope the data that we've gathered will actually help you as you work to maximize enrollment on your campuses. We also hope possibly it will help folks outside of higher education understand the magnitude of the impact that COVID-19 is likely to have on higher education, because its full effect may not be felt for another couple months. You know, if our data helps fuel the national conversation and helps get higher ed the support it so desperately needs, then we're just going to keep on doing what we're doing. Okay, so let's talk about the methodology. Our goal from the beginning, when we started talking about the first study, which we published in March, and if you haven't seen that, you can get access to that on our website. But our goal from the very beginning was to survey both college-bound high school seniors and current college students so that we could get a complete sense of what really might happen in the fall. And you can see some of the details of our data collection here. It was just, you know, almost 1,100 students that we surveyed in March, representative sample nationally, controlled by geography, collected the data from the 25th to the 30th of March. And then literally 3 weeks later to the day, we collected the data again, a separate sample with the exact same sampling frame, same sampling definition, and had almost 1,200 students respond to that. We were really careful even about the days of data collection. In both cases, it was a Wednesday to a Sunday that we collected the data, because the unemployment numbers come out on Thursday mornings, and we wanted to make sure that we sort of, you know, identically replicated that. Now, here's a really, really important thing to understand. On the right-hand side of your screen, you can see our sampling frame. We decided to focus solely on domestic enrollment of undergraduate students at four-year colleges and universities. That is the segment of higher education that we serve most. And we did this research to help our clients. So there are clearly so many other groups out there that are also important: two-year colleges, graduate enrollment, international enrollment, you know, all that are going to be affected by the impact of the pandemic. But for our part, we really wanted to dedicate this research to the four-year residential colleges and universities out there so that we could make a strong prediction about at least one segment of higher education. So that's why we decided to do that. So the prospective students, when we surveyed them in both cases, March and April, those are current high school seniors who were planning to attend a four-year residential college or university before the pandemic hit. So those are the only students that we even surveyed. If the student was planning, you know, back in January to attend a different type of institution, they didn't complete our survey. They were terminated, which doesn't mean they were killed. It just means they didn't complete the survey. And so the same is true for the current college students that we surveyed, four-year colleges and universities in the US. Now, before I leave this slide, I want to mention something very quickly. I want to thank Innovate MR for supporting us in getting this research done. We could not have done it without their help. Innovate MR they're a global online sampling technology firm. So basically, when we're hired by a college or university like any of you to survey a population for which you don't already have contact lists, we go to Innovate MR to find those people. So for example, if any university or college hired us to, say, survey philanthropic adults in your region about their attitudes and opinions of your institution, we would go to Innovate MR to find those people, to get them to respond to the survey. Same thing, you know, right now we're doing a study for an institution to test the demand for new master's programs in engineering. And so we went to Innovate MR to find the sample to get practicing engineers to complete our survey. So, you know, they saw the results of our first study and immediately recognized the value of replicating it. So, you know, we have to pay to get these students to participate in the studies, and Innovate MR shared those costs with us. So we are deeply grateful for their partnership. All right, so you saw the headline in Inside Higher Ed this morning. This is our number. Back on March 20th, Ted Mitchell, the president of ACE, sent a letter to Nancy Pelosi in which he predicted a 15% enrollment drop across all of higher ed for next academic year. He described that estimate as conservative, and it was based on extensive conversations with ACE members. So that the estimate came from, you know, what ACE was hearing from its member institutions. Ours are different. Ours are more narrowly defined, first of all, because we focus just on domestic, you know, undergraduate students attending four-year colleges and universities only. Our prediction is also more recent. It's based on data gathered a month later. And it's also based on student opinions, right? It's based on what they're telling us they're thinking and what they're going to do. So we arrived at this 20% by considering three things in particular. The percentage of high school seniors who have already changed their plans, the percentage of college students who are telling us that they've changed their plans for the fall, and then third, the likely behavior of students if colleges and universities are only able to offer online instruction in the fall. That was sort of the prevailing topic of conversation when we opened our second round of data collection is, oh my gosh, what if kids can't go back? And so we wanted to figure out what the impact would be if that actually happened. So we got to the 20% when we calculated the net effect of all three. Now, clearly, not all colleges will be affected equally. We're not predicting this decline on every campus. This is not an individual number, it's a sector number. So some could experience much worse declines, unfortunately, and some institutions may have no decline at all. But when we look at the whole sample, this is what we're predicting for the entire sector. We're actually working with 4 schools right now to conduct pulse surveys of their particular pool of incoming and returning students so they can understand exactly what's going to happen on their campus and make some more granular predictions for their individual institutions. So shout out to those institutions for supporting the small business community. Obviously, we need to keep in mind that any of these predictions could change, right? And they probably already have. We've been out of the field now for 9 days. Right. And I hesitate to guess what the data would say. I wish we could just kind of collect it on an ongoing basis. So we need to recognize that this could change even in very short periods of time. It makes me think about how, in just the last 24 hours, they're reporting that a vaccine may be available as early as September. We all know the V word changes everything. In fact, if there was even the promise of a vaccine in the short term, even if it wasn't, by September, but if we knew it was coming and we knew the trials were going well, especially if that were combined with even partial openings of college campuses, that could send a ton of kids back to their 4-year traditional college and university campuses and dramatically improve this prediction. So obviously, this is something that we're going to be watching very, very closely. So let's start at the beginning and unpack the prediction, right? Right off the top, we know 10% of high school seniors are gone. They've disappeared. They've already changed their mind. We found from our March study that the first wave, that 1 in 10 students who were planning to attend a 4-year traditional residential campus in the fall had already said, that's it, I've changed my mind, that's not happening. Little bit higher for first generation students, unfortunately, than for students who have a college educated parents. That difference is 14% to 8%. So the numbers are small, but the magnitude of the difference is great. Our findings were identical in March and April. So not only did we uncover the same fact in 2 different studies with 2 different but representative samples, but the data are also corroborated by other studies that you've been reading about in the higher education media. There was yet another study yesterday that found that about 12% of students who had already made deposits to 4-year colleges to attend full-time were no longer planning to attend. And the vast majority of these students blame COVID-19 for changing their plans. Now, what will these kids do instead, right? This 1 in 10 kids, which represents a lot of students, what will they do instead? Our research shows about half will go to community colleges. Another third will enroll in an online program of some sort, and the remainder, unfortunately, will not go to college at all. These numbers are actually not all that surprising when you consider the following. I've got 3 things to tell you here. Just over half of the college-bound high school seniors we surveyed, both in March and April, said that their parents' financial situation was being affected by COVID. In the April survey, we didn't ask anything about being furloughed or laid off in March, but we added that question for April, and we found that 1 in 3 of these kids who are, before the pandemic were planning to attend a 4-year college, 1 in 3 said that they had a parent who'd been furloughed or laid off. We also asked them about their anxiety, and on a 10-point scale of 1 is low, 10 is high, and about a third of the kids said that their anxiety about how COVID would affect their ability to begin their college career was an 8, 9, or 10, so a top 3 box. So there's a lot of stress. There's a lot of financial impact that is driving these numbers. Now, we reported back in March, we reported that about 1 in 4 students said that their choice of which college to attend was being, so not attending at all, but just which college to attend. 1 in 4 said that that decision was being affected by COVID. That funding was exactly the same in April, and we followed up with some open-ended questions about, why, how was that decision being affected? And we found 3 things. Affordability was number 1, students saying it's more important now than ever. Number 2, they said they're having difficulty comparing schools that they visited to ones that they were not able to ultimately because of the pandemic. And number 3, they were leaning towards schools that were closer to home. When I read this key finding, it immediately called to mind an interview that I did last week with a college-bound high school senior. We're trying to interview qualitatively as many kids as we can get our hands on. And this student told me that instead of going to the Ivy League institution that he had been admitted to, he was going to go to the public university in his home state for each of these 3 reasons. Affordability, he never got to visit the Ivy, and the school was closer to home. So that definitely rang true with what we have been hearing qualitatively. All right, so retention is going to be down too. In late March, you can see here, this 14% here represents the percentage of college students who told us that it was unlikely, highly unlikely, or too soon to say if they were going to be able to go back to their campus in the fall. And this was one of the biggest changes from our March to April data collection. That number went from 14 to 26. So now 26% of college students are saying they are unlikely, highly unlikely, or it's too soon to say whether or not that they will be able to go back to their campus. It's not surprising when you consider the same data points that I just told you about the high school students. Some of the same things are true with the college students. Just over half say that their parents' financial situation has been affected by COVID. 1 in 4 say that they have a parent that's been furloughed or laid off. And again, about a third say that their anxiety is an 8, 9, or 10 on a 10-point scale. So all of this illustrates a very high level of uncertainty around students' college plans. And when we think about the colleges, it just suggests to us that we need to take extreme measures to connect with these students, to provide them with information, to offer support, and explore options that would allow them to either start or continue their education. So this is where we take the big dip. This is the what if that we really wanted to capture so that we could make some reasonable predictions. If the colleges only open online, it's going to have a big impact on enrollment. Fully 20%, and this is, so we've already taken away 10%, 20% of the remainder who are still planning to go to a 4-year college this fall, even in spite of after the outbreak. 20% of those students are saying that they will change their plans if the schools only open online. 12% say they'll take a gap year. We're going to talk about that in a minute. And 5% say that they'll choose another school. So there is a bit of shuffling here from one school to another that we can't yet measure, but that's something we'll try to keep looking at. Retention is going to be a problem as well if we only open online. 14% of college students say that they will not return to their campus if online instruction is the only option. 7% of them say they'll do a gap year. And 4% say that they will transfer to another school. So it's interesting. It's 20% of the seniors that would be driven away by if online only is the option, if we're only able to open online, and 14% of current college students. So the idea of remote learning drives away even more freshmen than it does returning students, which is interesting because there was an Inside Higher Education article on Monday, a great article that laid out 15 potential scenarios that colleges and universities are considering. And One of them was the idea of bringing back freshmen only. Because that first year experience is so critical to connecting them to each other, connecting them to the campus, connecting them to the academic and the student experience. And actually, based on our research, it suggests that's not really a bad idea, because if schools are only able to open online, it's going to drive away a lot higher percentage of the freshmen than of the returning students. So the gap year, I mean, we all know the gap year has been increasing in popularity for like a decade, right? But look at this chart right here. This is showing mentions of a gap year on social media. Thank you to Campus Sonar for giving us this great chart to see what's going on. I mean, over the past 3 months, the conversations about the gap year are just going up, up, and up. And if I were a betting woman, I would say that traffic on the Gap Year Association website is probably at an all-time high. Whoever even knew there was a Gap Year Association, right? But I've been there 10 times in the last week to gather information. They have great information on their website. The last time they conducted a big survey was back in 2015. They've got one underway right now, and I'm dying to see what the findings are. Even they say that gappers, what they're called, are difficult to track. But the last time they were able to provide a firm estimate, they said that 3% of American freshmen typically take a gap year. So it's a tiny portion of the college-bound population, but the increase in interest is rapid and increasing at a rapid pace. So, but think about that. If 3% of freshmen do that in a typical year, I just told you that 12% of high school seniors told us in our survey that they would take a gap year if schools open online. So that's a 4-fold increase. Not to mention the fact that I told you 7% of current college students want to take a gap year. So it's, that's just not even something we're used to thinking about, right? A student going to campus for a year or two and then taking a gap year and then going back. So the gap year is really taking on a new form and new popularity. So that's something that we need to think about and prepare for. These findings definitely reinforce what we're hearing in qualitative interviews that we're doing with the high school seniors that I just mentioned. Lots of them are mentioning the gap year, and very flipped too. Like, when we say, what will you do if your chosen institution is only able to open online? It's like, I'll take a gap year. And what do you want to do in your gap year? Well, I don't know, but I'll just take a gap year. Sounds like a good idea, right? So this is going to be something to watch really carefully. We just talked with a writer at Inside Higher Ed on Monday who's writing a big piece about the gap year, possibly as early as tomorrow. So be looking for that, because I'm sure it's going to have a lot of good information. Okay, so COVID communications, this is something really important to recognize. A college or university's communications about the pandemic are so incredibly important. What we found is that 40% of college students say that they have a worse opinion of their own institution that they're attending since the outbreak of the pandemic. These findings were identical in March and in April. So it wasn't just a knee-jerk reaction to having to close, right? Like, because we know that students were very emotional back in mid-March when all the campuses closed and moved to online instruction. So we hypothesized perhaps, that 40% was going to go down in April, but it did not, right? So 40% of students still saying they have a worse opinion. And when we asked them to explain why, they gave us 5 key themes in open-ended questions. Number 1, they felt that the online experience didn't match the price that they had paid. A lot of talk about refunds, which I know you've been hearing. Number 2, they say the quality of the online classes is worse than the in-person instruction. We're going to get to that in a minute as well. The third most common response was they felt their school was slow to respond to the COVID outbreak and the communications were disorganized. Number 4, they weren't receiving enough. They said they weren't receiving enough communication from their school. And the fifth key theme there was that they were unhappy with the grading system and the lack of empathy that they were feeling in the situation. So, the thing that's important to realize is that there's a very strong correlation between these opinions of colleges and universities and the quality of the COVID-19 communications, because we ask both questions. How do you feel about your institution? Do you better, worse, the same? And then how do you rate the quality of your institution's COVID-19 communications? Excellent, good, fair, poor. 69% of the college students who said that their institution's COVID-19 communications were either fair or poor had a worse opinion of the school than before the pandemic hit. So the bottom line there is your communications with students, with parents, with prospects. It's just, you can't underestimate the importance. They are more important now than ever. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more when we get to some recommendations. Okay. Can you guys see this? I'm promoting North Central College there, one of our clients. All right, so let's talk about remote learning. Most students don't like it. 70% say they think it's worse. That figure was 66% in March and crept up a little bit in April. And it's interesting because as colleges transitioned to online instruction, there were a lot of people sort of worrying, hypothesizing that this exposure to a remote learning environment might actually increase preference for it, right? And perhaps negatively impact the preference for the traditional four-year in-person residential college experience. But as you can see, we're finding that 70% of students say that online learning is worse than in-person instruction. And in open-ended responses, they gave us a couple of key reasons they believe that to be true. They said it's hard to focus and get motivated when they're learning from home. They said there's a decline in the quality of the teaching, that their professors don't know very well how to teach online, which is probably true, but we'll get better. Number three, they said they feel like they're teaching themselves the material more in the remote learning environment. Number four, they felt like professors were less available to answer their questions. And then fifth, they felt like it was impossible to replicate key hands-on learning aspects of their education, things like labs. So it's interesting because when given the option, as you can see here in the data, to finish their degree online or go back to campus, I mean, we gave them a question that was really just a forced response. Do you want to go back or you want to finish online? Because we really wanted to force people to sort of give an opinion on that right now in this moment in time. And 85% said that they want to go back to their campus, but that leaves 15% sort of like that idea of finishing online, right? So it's another factor that we had to consider in making our predictions, because obviously that would influence retention. There's a little demographic difference that we wanted to make sure to point out here, because this preference for finishing online goes up a little bit for minority students and down a little bit for white students. And so you can see that noted on the bottom of the page. There's one other thing I want to mention here that is not actually on the page or even in the report. This is a special little tidbit, and I'd love to hear opinions about this. So if you have one, you can email me. But we asked students to prioritize graduating on time over returning to campus, and really to try to get at sort of what was really motivating people's decisions. And what we found was that 2 out of 3 prioritized graduating on time over returning to campus. So they want to graduate on time, even if it means that they have to do online instruction. 1 in 3 prioritize getting back to campus. So 1 in 3 kids said, I don't care if it takes me longer to graduate, I just want to get back to campus and learn that way. So that gives you a little bit more insight into the percentage of students who are falling into each camp. All right, there's a lot of data here. So we know for sure that COVID-19 is negatively impacting minority students more than white students. This is true for both high school seniors and for current college students. We're illustrating 3 metrics here, but we actually have 5 total. So I'll mention the other 2 that you're not looking at in just a second. 5 metrics total that show us that minority students are being hit harder. And first of all, we've got this one up at the top that says that among high school seniors, there's a higher percentage of minority high school students who say they're actually unlikely to go to college, or it's too soon to say, right? It's 41% of minority students and only 24% of white students. One of the statistics that's not listed here is that we also know that a higher percentage of minority students are still undecided. You know, a lot of the deadlines for making a decision have been pushed back, so it's okay to still be undecided. But we think that shows a little bit more, a lot more volatility among minority students than white students. 24% of the minority high school students that we surveyed said they're still undecided. That compares to only 14% of white students. You can see here that just the top choice of institution is shifting a lot more for minority students than it is for white students. So 33% of minority students have said, yeah, that where I'm going to go, I'm going, but where I'm going to go is changing, specifically because of COVID-19. And that number is only 15% for white students. And if we jump down to the bottom statistic, this is the college students now. 32% of minority students say it's unlikely that they'll return to their campus, or it's too soon to say, compared to just 22% of white students. And finally, this is not on the screen, but we know that COVID is affecting the decisions of minority students more than white students. It was 64% of minority students compared to just 44% of white students that said their college plans for fall are being affected by COVID. So this is a population that needs more support from us, and because they're definitely we just have statistic after statistic after statistic telling us that that they're more at risk. So great, I get to be the bearer of this wonderful news that the total effect on higher ed could be catastrophic. I mean, the worst case scenario is that both incoming freshmen and returning student enrollment is down. The number of gap students who defer increases significantly. That there will be a significant shift in enrollment, with a lot of students choosing to go to a community college or an online program instead of the four-year college or university that they originally planned to attend. Other students are not going to enroll or persist because they're turned off by the idea of remote instruction. And some, current students will get so used to remote instruction and be so focused on graduating on time that they may just actually opt to complete their degree that way. So all of those things, all of those factors are what led us to this estimate. So we're not going to leave you without making a few recommendations, because in any situation there are things that can be done. And the first one that we want to point out to everyone is just improving the sheer volume and quality of your communications with your new and returning students. I have to tell you, I mean, the students that we've been talking to, and even in the open ends from all of our survey research, you are doing a lot of communicating with these kids, giving them a lot of opportunities to participate in things like open houses and connecting them with students and panels, and giving them lots and lots of ways to interact with people on your campus and to get information. But if we just want to encourage you to think about, the fact that it's really just not enough to post updates on your COVID-19 page and, hope students find them. We want you to find new ways to adapt the content to fit the medium, to make it easier to consume in email and social media and, Instagram stories, Snapchat, TikTok, do whatever you can to get information to your students and make it easy for them. Even things like investing in advertising or paid promotion to make sure that your messages are being seen and heard. Err on the side of over communicating, even when you don't even have any new news to share. Being transparent, sharing the options that you're considering, letting people weigh in on their preferences for those options, telling people when you'll be making decisions, providing updates on your updates. All of that is going to go a long way. We also recommend, developing some sort of regularity around your communications, daily updates, every other day updates, that kind of thing, so people know when they can get new and updated information from your institution. The bottom line is for now, a more is more strategy is appropriate when it comes to your communications, because everyone is hungry for as much information as they can get that will help them understand what's going to happen in the fall. Secondly, we're sensing a need for more opportunities not sensing, we've identified a need for more opportunities to connect one-on-one at best, or one to a few, more than one to many. Admitted students report being invited to virtual open houses and other kinds of events. All of that is wonderful. But both new and returning students are also indicating a need for more one-on-one contact and contact in small groups. They want to connect with faculty, peers, advisors, alumni, staff, people who can answer their questions. Because a lot of what we're hearing is that some of the virtual events that are being held are just too general. A lot of times we hear students saying that they're being provided with information that could easily be found on the institution's website. Q&A type events with large groups just don't, like this one, don't allow them to get their specific questions answered. So the pandemic is affecting each one of them differently. And so we encourage you to connect with students individually as much as possible. We know that's not possible on large campuses because you don't have enough staff to do it. But even connecting with smaller groups with shared characteristics to find out how they're doing may go a long way to helping you figure out identify students who are at risk. And then obviously once you know they're at risk, then you can identify strategies for mitigating the factors that might keep them from either enrolling or re-enrolling on your campus. So thirdly, we want you to remind students what they love about your campus. We've seen so many passionate responses from students who they just want to feel it again. And all of your campuses have rich traditions. As I've heard students talk about wanting to experience their campus again, it reminds me when I was in college, and this is a long time ago. But when I was in college, everyone would flock to the D Hall when they were serving the chicken sandwich. It was the best thing they made. And honestly, I was thinking if somebody could send me a scratch and sniff so I could smell that chicken sandwich, I would be immediately turned into an 18-year-old again and feel that same passion for my alma mater that I felt all those many years ago. So I'm joking, of course, but we work with campuses where the bell tolls every hour. Or, students aren't allowed to walk on the sidewalk that has the seal in it until they're a senior. Or there's a quirky faculty member who, rides a funny bike or roller skates across campus. I mean, those are all the things that your students want to connect with. Anything that you can do to allow them to experience those aspects of your campus that they love so dearly in a remote setting is going to go a long way to reconnecting with them and reminding them what they love so much about being on your campus. So the gappers, all signs point to record increases in requests to defer enrollment, either for a semester or for a year, and not just among your freshmen. This could happen, a sizable portion of your current college students could also be interested in this. So planning now for how to handle a flood of requests to defer enrollment, especially if your campus is getting ready to announce that its plans are to open, exclusively online in the fall. It's time to review those policies, and probably many of you have already done that, but we think it's even more important that you develop a firm and unified position on whether your campus actually wants to encourage or discourage students from taking a gap year. It may be beneficial for your campus to actually encourage that and to make it possible and easy. It also may be beneficial for your institution to discourage that. And so your institution needs to get on the same page about whether or not that's something that you're going to really put out there and facilitate as an option, or if it's something that you want to steer your students away from. So make those decisions, share those options and your policies with students early and frequently, because the popularity of the gap year is getting ready to explode. So finally, give your students, every possible reason to show up in the fall. Now's the time to think creatively, be flexible, innovate, and act quickly about academics, campus life, cost and aid, career services, everything. We've seen so many great ideas in this category. One of my favorites that I mentioned on our March webinar about our first wave of findings is the free course that Oberlin is offering, the liberal arts perspective on the pandemic. I think we have some people from Oberlin on the call. Love this idea so much. First of all, because it's free. Second of all, because it's so perfectly on brand. And think about the opportunities that they're creating for admitted students to get to know each other, get connected to each other, get connected to a professor, experience Oberlin, even if it is remote, get tied into their campus, and how powerful that could be in motivating them to want just so badly to get there in the fall or whenever they can, or to perhaps endure a partial opening or a totally remote opening for a semester so that they can ultimately get there at some point. So we love that idea. It's so innovative. We have some folks from Central Michigan on the phone too. Central Michigan has frozen its tuition, allowing students to defer payment. You know, obviously responding to the financial pressure that the pandemic is creating is sort of job one. So ideas like that are really important to the extent that the institution can handle them. And messaging around them is really going to go a long way to reducing anxiety around fall. Beloit College also came out with so many changes, really interesting to read. All of the changes that they've made so quickly, changed their academic calendar. I mean, that's sort of a big deal, right? They've implemented an aggressive, what they call an advanced mentoring program to connect with students one-on-one, as I was just saying a minute ago. And then they have a wide variety of financial support programs. So all of those things just go so far toward developing, you know, the kind of goodwill that's going to get students and parents excited about coming back. So finally, parents. Parents honestly scare me. And it's possible that's just because we haven't surveyed them ourselves. Other firms have, but we haven't. And they are the X factor because we think that they're going to have severe coronavirus PTSD. Living in the residence halls is going to be a big concern, as are other things like cost and remote education. You know, there's a great study that was done by this the strategy consulting firm in Boston, Titan Partners, that was released. You can Google it, but they've got some good data on parents, and they said that one of the more interesting things that they found are that there are a couple of key things parents are concerned about. First of all, they think remote learning is of lesser quality. So if we're going to be opening partially or fully online, that's a hump we're going to have to get them over. They're leaning towards sending their kids closer to home. We've seen that preference both among students and parents. They don't think professors are as good teaching online as they are in person, and they don't want to pay full price for remote learning. So those are a couple of the key factors that as far as our marketing and communications go, we're going to have to address with parents. And we also have to just brace ourselves because we don't really know yet what parents are going to do and what their behavior is going to be, what their reactions will be to the you know, the many forms of opening the campus that might occur in the fall. Okay, so thank you. We hope these findings help you, and we want you to share them across your campus. Use them to prepare for what lies ahead. As I mentioned before, we will send the webinar recording and the full report to everyone who signed up for this afternoon. Also know that now is a great time to conduct research. We're collecting data in hours or days that used to take us weeks. People are online, response rates are through the roof. So if you are looking to replicate this study for your audiences, call us. We can do it for you, or you can do it on your own. I mentioned in our March webinar that we would be happy to provide both our raw data and our survey instruments to anybody who wanted to replicate these findings on their own. That offer still stands. Just get in touch with us and we'd be happy to give it to you. We'd even be happy to give you the fully programmed files in Qualtrics if you use Qualtrics. And then you can just pop it up and start driving traffic to it to help you understand you know, what these numbers look like with just your populations. Again, call us if you want to talk about these findings. We're here to help, and we're actually offering free hour-long whiteboard sessions right now if you want to talk through the marketing challenges that you're facing. So we'll make sure you have information about that. In closing, I just want to say that we have been amazed at your creativity and your agility that you've shown in these weeks since the outbreak. We probably all need to admit that without the pandemic, a lot of the changes that we've seen may not have happened. And some of them are positive. I mean, if there's a silver lining, that's it for sure. So we want to thank you for all that you're doing to support higher education. We believe it's an essential service. We're rooting for you and want to thank you for joining us today. So stay safe, everyone, and get in touch with us if we can help you.